Welcome to Yoke, Rehashed, Generation Next, with Larry Tazuma and Summer Wynn. Yoke is back.
Hi, and welcome to the OG Yoke Generation Next podcast. We're excited to bring you today's guest, Olivia Cheng. Now, you may know her from her role as Atoy in the Bruce Lee-inspired series Warrior, which also starred Andrew Koji. Now, prior to that, she was in the Netflix series Marco Polo as Mei Lin. In 2022, she won a Leo Award for Best Supporting Female for Sheltering Season. And in 2024, she executive produced Lucky Star, a film that takes a raw look at gambling addiction in the Chinese community. She's also directed a documentary about the late Raquel Welch titled I Am Raquel. Here's Olivia Cheng. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to talk about Lucky Star. Both of us are very familiar with the movie because we just watched it. And congratulations on this movie. You are an executive producer. You also starred as Noelle. And I got to thank you for both executive producing and starring in this movie, because I know it's very important to the Asian community that something like this gets produced, because it's addiction and gambling are very important, very terrible for the Asian community. I mean, what do you think about that? And what's your thoughts about that?
I really appreciate that you started with that comment, because we screened it now in, I think, 3-4 cities, and we have some other cities coming up. But the thing that has struck me so much, Larry, is how after the movie comes out, the conversations afterwards, sometimes people I've known for over 20 years are suddenly telling me and sharing with the group of people we're standing around with how their parents used to park outside a casino and leave them in the car to the point where they fall asleep while they would gamble inside, and that was their summer vacation. Or, a good friend of mine said, that was me and my dad. That's my dad. Lucky is my dad. So I knew it was an issue within our community. I remember years ago, one of the first modeling jobs I was offered was to be the face of a casino in Vancouver. And I really could have used the money, but I felt weird doing it because I knew, I'd grown up with people who'd they'd come home and the electricity would be cut off, or some of their furniture would be repossessed because their parents had gambled things away again. And I felt weird that this casino was specifically, seeking an Asian face to appeal to Asians in the community to say, come on in, you're welcome. I was like, am I contributing to the problem? But I still didn't realize how deep rooted it was for people that, like I said, I'd known for a really long time. So it almost feels like it's this invisible addiction that we don't talk about.
Right. So I feel intimately connected to this story. So I'm Japanese, but I grew up in Seattle, and I grew up amongst a lot of Toisan and Cantonese. So I was very intimately connected. All of my best friends were Cantonese and Toisan. And so I grew up amongst a lot of Kainui, Kaidoi, but my friends grew up and became adults. And I know Lucky probably did not become that adult that everyone else did, right? Is that sort of the story? Noelle became an adult.
Yeah,
Lucky did not.
It's funny, right? Because you kind of see a little bit of a good cop, bad cop dynamic between Lucky and Noelle. Lucky is, I think they're both really cool parents. But I think Noelle is definitely the one who has had to become more pragmatic, has had to really step into adulting to really make sure that the family's held together. I think Lucky steps in and clearly does the best that he can. I think that his pride keeps him from doing the very things he maybe could do for greater stability for the family. And that's his growth, right? His character flaw at the beginning is that he feels he's above certain kinds of jobs and above certain kinds of ways of meeting his adult responsibilities to be the father to his daughter and not the other way around.
Yeah.
And it's an addiction, so you can't be like, oh, he's choosing. Like, obviously it's an addiction, so it's a form of, an illness and a compulsion. But you see him sort of choosing again and again and again to do something that he feels isn't beneath him, but causes so much chaos within the family unit.
I've heard addiction being described as trying to hold back diarrhea. And it's such an apt description, don't you think?
I've never heard it described that way. But,
Yeah.
when I came into this movie, I have a lot of experience loving people with addictions.
Mhm.
I had a very, very, very close friend struggle with alcohol addiction to the point where I, needed to step back for a little while. And we're healing now, but there was like a period of estrangement, because sometimes you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself.
Yeah.
And I have other folks in my life. I mean, my industry is very rife with people who have various forms of substance abuse addiction, so I've been around it a lot. And when I stepped into this role, I was in a place where what was going on for me personally, I was like, well, I may as well use it. I may as well bring that
Certainly.
understanding into what it feels like to suspect that something is going on, feel your nervous system not relax because something's not right, but then you're also almost gaslighting yourself as the person in question is also sort of gaslighting you. Like I know that cycle very well, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have my own demons. Summer, I don't know about you, but I maybe not be gambling, but sure, video games, stock market. I mean, I have my own demons. So there was some times where I was like, I got to turn this off. I got to stop watching, and then I came back because I was like, you got to watch this because I need this. I need to watch this, so I don't turn into this monster myself, Yeah. So, and then there was this part where Noelle had an opportunity to take advantage of something with the watch.
Ah, right. Without giving too much away.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
I see what you're doing. Yeah, that's, we actually shot a couple endings around that. And I'm just trying to think how to talk about this to, viewers or listeners who are like, what about a watch? But I think what really fascinated me about Jillian McKercher, our writer director, creating this story is it felt like a very real family to me. Like, I know people like this. I grew up with the Lucky and Noels of Edmonton, Alberta, which is actually the sister / cousin / rival city of Calgary, where our story is actually set. They're the two big cities in Alberta where, funnily enough, the entire cast is from. We just all happen to be Albertan, and I think we all brought that kind of rough and tumble prairie essence into our roles. But I think it was very realistic that Noelle wasn't this like perfect wife who is so angelic and never does anything wrong, and then Lucky is just this villain and always messing up. I thought it was really interesting to show that when the pressure's on anybody, when the pressure's on a character like Noelle, that even she can experience the temptation of a quick financial fix. And like I said, we shot a couple endings because we weren't sure. We could have taken her one way. And if it had gone one way, I thought, all right, well, if she didn't do quote unquote the right thing, then it would maybe make sense that that's why her and Lucky are together, But in the end, I liked that we chose the ending we chose, because I think it spoke to, even though she was incredibly tempted, and given how we as the audience saw what she was dealing with in terms of dealing with like the financial earthquakes caused by her husband, I think we understood if she had chosen the less ethical route. But I like the ending that we chose because I think it shows that above all, she chose her daughter's future. Because by doing what she did in the end, it gave her the open pathway to make a connection on behalf of her daughter, getting that better life, that as flawed as they are as parents, both, that was the one thing that Lucky and Noelle have in common is they want better for their kids. They want their kids to do better than they were able to do.
Yes. Perfect segue here. Edmonton, Alberta. I've never been there. I've been to Vancouver probably 20 times. Seattle, that's where I grew up. Been to Vancouver every summer, went to P&E, right? So tell me, Edmonton, Alberta, you got your start there, your big break with what was it, Broken Trails? Is that correct?
Yeah. So Edmonton, Alberta, I'm guessing your audience is mainly American.
Yes.
So we are a city 6 hours north of the Montana border. In the film industry, we're known as the Texas of Canada because that's where a lot of the Westerns are shot. So starting, I think, way, way, way back with Lonesome Dove to more recently like Damnation, Hell on Wheels, the first season of Last of Us was shot in Calgary, Alberta. And Broken Trail, which was the project that launched me fully into pursuing acting, was also shot in Calgary. So Calgary's actually 3 hours south of Edmonton. So I was a news reporter at the time. I clearly had an interest in arts and acting. I think that's always what I wanted to do, but it was never something I seriously thought of because there was no reference point for that being a real possibility in a place like Edmonton. We had no schools. We didn't really have, we had no film and television community. Once a year, we would get like a Christmas television movie that came to Edmonton, and I would be like an extra on it. I would be what they call today like a background artist, and I loved it. I loved it. I would go there for a day and watch the cameras and, watch the stars work, and it would just feed me until the next year. Then another Christmas movie came. So when Broken Trail came to Alberta, they were looking for 5 Chinese girls to play opposite, Oscar winner Robert Duvall, Oscar nominee Thomas Hayden Church, legendary director Walter Hill. And Duvall is actually like, he loves finding non-actors because he believes that if you find non-actors who understand the world, they can bring sort of this authenticity that you can't necessarily get from an actor pretending to understand that world. So, like the Apostle, surrounding himself with people who really live that kind of church life. So yeah, I went from being a background artist to getting this big audition for Broken Trail, which was based on something that had happened to his neighbor's ancestor, who during a cattle drive across America came upon a wagon of abandoned Chinese girls. So he turned that into this whole story.
Amazing.
And I got this call to go to Calgary and audition. And at the time I was a news reporter in Edmonton. And I mean, they know this now. We're all still friends. My old news manager and my old boss. But I would call in sick and I would drive to Calgary and do this audition, and then I wouldn't get it. I'm like, oh, okay. And then they call, and I didn't understand the industry at all. So they kept calling me back week after week after week to go for the different girls because there were 5 characters. And it was like the callback was every Wednesday. So I was getting so stressed out because I'm like, I'm calling in sick once a week. Wednesday. I had a little bit of public profile in Alberta already. And I was like, what if someone recognizes me, like filling up my gas tank in Red Deer? And, so that I did get my start in Alberta because, that I ended up getting one of the parts in Broken Trail to, get I think 16 Emmys, and we won the Emmy for Best Miniseries. That's
fantastic.
And that's what launched me into moving to Vancouver to pursue this full time.
How did you train yourself that way to just audition? Like you've never done it, and you've only done the on-camera work for reporters.
Yeah, now I understand things that I didn't understand at the time. So a lot of times, like when I was in scene study, for example, when I went to scene study afterwards, once I landed in Vancouver, one thing that I would notice or would learn about is anytime we had to do like accent work for a part, because we're playing someone from Brooklyn or someone from Rhode Island, it would just naturally affect some of your behaviors, some of your body language, because it would bring a certain sort of culture in. So because Broken Trail was done, I did it all in Mandarin. I don't know. I just innately understood this. I just innately had this like naturalism and groundedness that I then could not replicate when I went to Vancouver and suddenly started auditioning in English, which is like my first language, and because my parents were a little worried that I would get too confused, hearing too many languages. So they really focused on Mandarin when I got to kindergarten and beyond, and English, because they wanted me to assimilate in Canada. So their own language, Cantonese, took the biggest backseat of all the languages that I was exposed to growing up. And once I started auditioning in English, I sounded like a news reporter, that clipped cadence that news reporters are really famous for. And it took me a long time to break that cadence and just learn how to live on screen, because it was weird. It was almost like speaking in English. It brought up all the insecurities I have as I think, a 20-something girl moving through the world. But I think in particular, like a 20-something, Asian Canadian girl who was really insecure if I was like, when I was one way around my Asian friends, and then around, in the greater non-Asian world, I had a lot more masks on. I had a lot more, people-pleasing behaviors. And if you're going to become an actor, it's almost like they break down a lot of that conditioning. It's almost about demasking all of that appropriateness. Especially as an adult, they have to break all that down. So it's like me speaking in English seemed to bring all this baggage that I wasn't even conscious about. And I've lost track of what the original question was, but
No, but yeah, the vulnerability. You really on the job training. It's so amazing.
You know what? I think sometimes, I mean, a bit of a callback to what I said about Duvall is sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not about finding the most trained actor. It's about finding, I think, someone with like a certain essence that you can't quite explain, and they just understand it. Like I've seen it now, right? Like I've seen it when I'm in the room watching the casting process. Like someone walks in and they're not trying to do anything. It's just who they are. You can't teach that. And someone can try to imitate that quality, but it's still going to be their version of that quality. So for that particular role, it was a bit of a lightning in a bottle moment. And then, actually what I've learned is sometimes, you see it all the time, right? Like you see people who are cast in one project, but they can't quite replicate that success or transfer what they brought to that one project to create a career that has a lot more longevity. So the challenge after the lightning in a bottle moment of Broken Trail was, how do I get there again? And it was like a lag in years, because now I had to train and now I had to figure out what I was actually doing to be mindful about using it with craftsmanship and not just kind of like, there was a raw talent, but and a raw instinct, but it's kind of like,
yeah,
how do you
always
recreate
like
the wheel?
having to
yeah. It's like you might have been able to build this shape, but now you have to learn to build this shape.
and then shape.
Yeah.
So now we're going to segue into I Am Raquel. As a director role, your directorial debut. You're a former journalist, and I went to J school. So did they just dump 150 hours worth of footage on your lap, and then you just go to work, or what happened?
No. So it was in the middle of, well, I'll back up even more. It's because I've been asked, like, how did that come about? And it was 14 years in the making, in a sense, because when I was a struggling actor, before Marco Polo, but just when I was on the precipice of finally understanding how to act. And I was super, super, super broke. I'd gone through another Christmas where I didn't even have the money to fly myself home. And my parents had to pay for my plane ticket to go home. And then I came back to Vancouver, and I just felt like a real failure of an adult, that I was like, I can't even afford a plane ticket home. And, my nephew had been born at that point, and I was like really catastrophizing. I was like, man, if my whole family got wiped out, I wouldn't be able to take care of this baby, because I'd be his relative. And I'm like, I need to pull my life together. And so I quit acting for like a month. Maybe it wasn't a month, maybe it was like 2 weeks. And I went around town looking for like a real job. And my plan had been, let me get a proper job for 5 years, save up some money, and then I'll come back to this with a bigger nest egg so that I can just not be so up and down, right? Such yo-yo income when you're an actor and you're just trying to break in and just
it's tough, yeah.
And even anywhere in your career, so eventually I was put in touch with the founder of Network Entertainment, which is a Vancouver-based company behind projects, the I Am series. So I am Bruce Lee, I am Heath Ledger, I am Richard Pryor, I am MLK Jr., or MLK. And I told him about my media skills. And I said, look, I came out here to be an actor. I don't want to work out here for you full time. But I just need a job, any job. If it's 2 weeks, 2 months, and I just need flexibility, do you have something in here? These are all my skills. I can write, I can edit, I can shoot, I can, help with a website. And that's what they brought me in to do for 2 months. They paid me to help them build a website. And then that was it. There was really no more work for me, but that kind of got me through that time. And then I started picking up other freelance work. And using my media to like find ways to, fund myself. And even though I only worked for them for 2 months, we stayed in touch throughout the years. And so suddenly when they called during 2023, I thought it was about a previous project we talked about, but Derek Murray called and said, obviously we've followed your career. We've, your name comes up from time to time because, we'd love to work with you again. And so we're just calling to check interest and availability in directing I Am Raquel Welch. And I was like, oh my God, like it was just so, it was literally something that just kind of landed in my lap. Or in a way, it was like a seed that was planted, 14 years ago that just suddenly like shot up, like, just suddenly like bloomed big, And so I'm incredibly grateful for it because, they wanted a female filmmaker. They thought it'd be interesting to have a female filmmaker who was an actress herself. And of course, they knew I had the background in journalism. So it was kind of a perfect fit for all my career and life experience to dive into Raquel's story. And I'm so glad I did. It was so satisfying to get to use part of my brain again and do long form journalism, basically.
I mean, great story arc. I mean, pre-40s, you're just wondering, when is she going to find her voice? When is she going to speak against this misogynism, this sexism, all this stuff? And then she, finally this whole MGM stuff happens. And then she does finally find her voice. And that's where the whole story arc happens in your documentary. So, congratulations on that.
Thank you. And I think Raquel always, there is so much footage and there's so much footage of hers that is out there that we just weren't able to use for the documentary because, our budget was our budget. And, I don't know any other 15-year-old from the 1950s who has like cinematically shot news footage of them winning one of their first beauty contests, you know, but that was like $30,000 right there for like a 20-second clip. So there's so much great footage of Raquel we weren't able to put into the documentary.
Sure.
But yeah, I think the thing that fascinated me about her story was just like, what would it have been like to be a sex symbol during a time when women were not allowed to own credit cards, when women were not allowed to have their own mortgages unless their husbands or fathers co-signed, and it was still not illegal for husbands to beat their wives or rape their wives. You know, like second wave feminism came at the height of Raquel's career, and she had a very uneasy relationship with feminism, even though I don't think she got credit for being probably one of the most, you know, influential feminists of that era and of her lifetime.
Right.
You know? So yeah, it was a really fascinating story.
We don't have much time, so let's talk about Marco Polo and Warrior sort of in the same breath. Marco Polo, of course, happened, 10 years ago. You played Maylin, also Warrior. You played Atoy. I loved watching Warrior because I'm a big Bruce Lee fan. That has been sort of this whole theme throughout our Yoke podcast. In Warrior, you played everything. You were the madame of a brothel. You certainly had many different intimate scenes. Maybe were you intimate with Andrew Koji? I can't remember.
Oh my God! Right off the in the pilot.
Yeah.
I'm like,
There you go.
I'm sad that we were that memorable together
Okay.
on screen. You're like, did you? Yeah,
because
yeah,
it was
right in the
so
pilot.
long ago since I saw it. But you did everything. You were burned. You were beaten. You were you went through so many different things. You were fine, and then in the third season, you became this vigilante swords person who was killing these people at the end. And I was like, wow, you've done everything in this series, you know. And what's your thoughts on this whole character arc in Warrior?
Well, I mean, Atoy starts immediately as a vigilante. So even right in the pilot, we established that she's not just a madame, but that at night, you know, she hunts the people who are hunting her people. It was kind of like getting to play a superhero of sorts, because I mean, all of us, right? Koji, you know, Taz, Jason, we all played, you know, Chen, you know, Dean playing Leary. We all played these sort of extraordinary fighters. So even though I think the key, you know, the key warrior is Andrew Koji's character, it's a cast that's populated by warriors of, you know, all different kinds. You know, even like the police officers, played by Kieran Bew and Richard, you know, by Kieran Bew and Tom Weston Jones. You know, everyone's a fighter in some way, shape, or form. So it was really cool for me to kind of get to like represent someone female who could hold it down in that world, who was someone who could be feared in that world. And also I really liked how, you know, we all kind of had these in a way, like very heightened, elevated, a little superhuman. And that's why I'm saying a little superhero abilities with, you know, these legendary fighting skills. And also in my case, these legendary healing skills. Heal from some of the things they put Atoy through. And then next season, you know, her face is perfect, you know, makeup flawless, and she's back out there.
Fast healer.
Right? Yeah. I mean, like the guys would get so beat up, and like, they didn't throw as many prosthetics on their faces sometimes. You know, I went through that first fight with the butchers, and, you know, my face was like, you know, messed up, you know, at the end of season 2. So, you know, I don't, you know, I have such a soft spot for the Warrior project in my career and in my life. I think it's really the first project I've done that I really feel like deeply resonated for folks in the Asian diaspora community worldwide.
Mm.
And I mean, like, deeply resonated in a really profound way. And maybe it was in part because it coincided with the pandemic and the rise of, global anti-Asian, prejudice and boycotts and hate and violence that,
Right.
it really meant
Yeah,
something.
really addressed that head on. So
It was eerily topical. Like, it was
Yeah.
surreal, because we would all get messages in different forms. Like, I remember I quietly met with a teacher who was trying to rewrite racial policy within her school that recognized, the kind of racism that Asian students are, were getting subject to, and felt incredibly depressed with the bureaucracy of her school system. And then happened to go to Warrior, and literally watching us fight racism, it kind of gave her that strength to, like, keep fighting in her own way. So knowing that I've got to be part of something that means so much to people, not just in the content in and of itself. And I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. It's incredibly violent. It's incredibly sexual. It's our version of, like, Gangs of New York, but in Chinatown, San Francisco. Not everyone's cup of tea, but for the people it resonated with, it's meaningful. And just the fact that it's part of Bruce Lee's legacy, like, it's I don't know. It doesn't quite sink in, because I feel like I'm gonna get Bruce Lee books and Bruce Lee t-shirts, for the rest of my life, because of this association with his television show, his concept, his idea that Shannon Lee, after her father's death, was finally able to bring to life, on his behalf.
Well, you played so many superhero characters in your whole career, and every character seems different no matter what. So thank you for doing all that wide dimensional superhero kind of characters, even though you ground them with their emotions, with the support of everybody of your characters. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that.
I would say you're incredibly brave to do these things,
Olivia, we hope you come back. I'm sorry, Larry. Yeah, we have to end.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we have to end it to respect the time that she has with the other people too. But we hope you come back, because we didn't get a chance to do your real career perspective. And I hope you we can do it after your premiere of your Lucky Star film, which was amazing. Thank you, Jillian, and you guys, and Terry.
Of course. Oh, so are we going to do part 2 at some point?
Yes, if you allow it. If you
know what? I'm shooting here in Toronto. Is the video going to be part of this podcast?
Yes, we're opening the
This isn't actually my home. So this is this is the hotel apartment they've got me in. I'm in Toronto shooting. So there will be something else to promote later in the year.
It looks fine on video.
Do something else down the line.
To be honest, your whole career is a promotion. So we have to celebrate it. We have to celebrate it. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Summer, so nice to see you again. Yeah. Thank you for coming to the LA screening, and then, jumping off to do something like that. And Larry, it was so nice to meet you.
Very nice
really
to meet you.
Appreciate both your time.
We appreciate yours.
Okay. Amazing.
Okay. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, bye. You too. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for the next episode. Pop the yolk and spread the love. Yolk is